Do you have any old t-shirts lying around? Maybe some that are destined for the donation bin, or they have stains or rips, or your kids just don't wear them anymore. Maybe they outgrew them. What do you do with all of these clothes other than donate them? Well, I'm going to teach you how to make a tote bag from just a plain old t-shirt. Hey friends, I'm Jess from the blog siloandsage.com, and here we talk about all things homeschool, homestead, and handmade. And today we are going to be turning t-shirts into tote bags because I don't know about your house, but we end up with t-shirts that have stains or came from a random soccer camp and have stains or the kids just outgrew them. And that's a lot of things to send to the donation pile. Sometimes I find it better to actually use them for something in our house instead of buying something new. Some people call this upcycling, some people call this repurposing, but either way, it saves you a little bit of money because either the t-shirt is one you got for free or that you already bought in the first place. Now, even if you are not a seamstress, you don't really feel like you're good at sewing, I am going to show you two ways to make a tote bag. One with some really simple sewing that I promise you can do, and a second way that doesn't involve any sewing at all. So let's get to it. Now, the first thing that you are going to do with your t-shirt is you are just going to cut off the sleeves. Now, you can do this with scissors, you can do this with a rotary cutter like I have. I have a whole post on my website that I will link to below all about how to use a rotary cutter if you've never used one before, but they are very simple. The one thing you just want to know is to keep your fingers away from the blade while you are cutting because they are very sharp. So I'm just going to release the guard off of the blade, and I will admit that my blade is pretty dull. So normally when you use a rotary cutter, it glides very easily, but mine doesn't glide quite as easily right now. I have to push a little bit on it. So I'm just gonna cut off the sleeves like that. Oh, see, evidence of a dull blade. Just take the sleeves off. And I'm gonna do the next one. Now you don't really need to worry about the sleeves being exactly equal because it's just a simple tote bag, but you can measure if you'd like. Now we are just going to cut off the neck. Now we're going to scoop down a little bit, and if you want to keep your graphic on your t-shirt, you want to make sure that you leave a little bit of space between the graphic and your cut. Now, if you have a sharp blade, you don't have to do this a million times. Next, you're gonna want to cut off the bottom of the t-shirt to the length of the tote bag that you want. Now, you can leave it as is. I find that the hem tends to be a little bit bulky, so even if you want it about this length, I personally would cut it a little bit shorter just so you don't have to deal with the bulk of the hem. And I'm not too worried about it being perfectly straight because it is just a simple tote bag. So I've got my t-shirt, I've got the sleeves cut off, and I've got the neck scooped a little bit, and I cut the bottom off. Now I am just going to sew one simple stitch on the bottom of the t-shirt, and then we'll have a tote bag. So the first thing we need to do is turn the t-shirt inside out because we want the stitching to be on the inside. And it's not really a big deal if you didn't cut a straight line, unless you are really particular, but it's just a t-shirt tote bag that we are probably gonna throw I don't know, towels in at the beach or something really simple. So I'm not worried about it being a very straight line. I'm also not even worried about changing the color of my thread. I have blue thread in here and I do not care to change it. So if you have a different color thread and you want to make sure it's matched, go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take the edge of this t-shirt, the bottom edge that I cut, and I am going to slide it under my presser foot. Now, I want it to be very close to the edge, but I want to leave a little bit of seam allowance so that my stitches are not on the very edge. Now, I'm using only about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can use a bigger one. It is not really important because this is just a tote bag. Now, if you were planning on putting something very, very heavy in this, which I wouldn't really suggest because it's just stretchy knit fabric, but if you were wanting to put something a little bit heavier, you may want to give it a little extra seam allowance so you can kind of double stitch so that you can make sure that your seam is very strong. Now, if you have a serger like I do, you can also use a serger for this, but since most people don't have a serger, I'm showing you how to do this on a regular sewing machine. Now you want to use a zigzag stitch. That's the one that kind of looks like a Z, and it is the best stitch to use for knit fabrics, especially for something like this because it is much stronger than a straight stitch that just goes in one line. So I'm going to start my stitches and then I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go backwards. Mine has a button. Each machine is a little different in how to reverse. But the reason that I'm going to reverse it is that it locks my stitches in place and makes sure that the thread does not unravel. So I just do that a couple times and then I'm going to sew forward all the way until the end. Now, as I get to the end, I am now going to reverse again to lock the stitches in place. I'm going to reverse a couple stitches and then I'm going to go back and sew across the end. Now, my machine has a button that I can cut my thread. If yours doesn't, pull it out and cut the thread yourself. Now the edge of this fabric for a t-shirt is not going to fray, so you don't need to worry about finishing the edge. But if you have a lot of extra fabric left over, you can use a pinking shears or even just a scissors to cut off the extra. But you definitely want to leave a little bit of extra so that you don't end up cutting through your stitches. So this is a perfect amount for me. I'm not worried about it. It's going to be inside. I don't need to finish it. It is going to be perfect. So now that I've got my t-shirt sewn at the bottom, all I'm going to do is flip it around the right side out. And now I have a tote bag. Really, really simple. Now, like I said before, you can reinforce the bottom seam by stitching it twice, but I'm not really finding that to be necessary because we're not going to put anything really heavy into this tote bag. Now I'm going to show you how to do a no-sew version of this tote bag. So we're going to start with the same steps and we are going to cut the sleeves off. Then we're going to cut the neck off. Now this shirt is smaller, so I want to make sure I get pretty close to the neck so that my straps are not really, really skinny. Now we are going to take the bottom of this t-shirt and we are going to cut it into strips. Now you can use a scissors for this, or you can use your rotary cutter. I'm actually going to use my scissors. So first I'm going to cut along the sides. And I want to make sure that the length of the slits is about the same, but it doesn't need to be exact. Now I'm just going to cut through both layers of the shirt and make little strips like this. This is a really, really easy craft or activity that your kids could do actually, because there's no sewing involved. And this would be super easy to do even if you're like away on a vacation and you discover you need a tote bag and you can't go buy one. Just grab an old t-shirt and make one. So you could use a t-shirt that, you know, your kids have outgrown, that you're not ready to get rid of. You could use a stained t-shirt. You could use kind of a souvenir type t-shirt like the soccer camp t-shirt. I have an extra one and we'll see how that works out. So now I'm going to take this t-shirt and I'm actually going to turn it inside out so that when I do this next part, it is on the inside. I'll lay it flat again. And now I'm just gonna take these strips and I'm gonna tie them together. I'm gonna tie it kind of tightly. I'm gonna double knot it so that it doesn't come undone. And I'm just gonna keep going down the line until I have tied all of them. Now, once you have tied the bottom of this t-shirt, you can see that it's a little bit bunched at the bottom, but that's just because it's a very small size. This is a child size 4, so it's a very small t-shirt. But now all we have to do is turn it right side out and we have a little tote bag. Now, I see one of our little strips popped out, so I am just going to kind of poke it back in, and there we go, a little tote bag. Now obviously this one is really tiny and it would probably be a great option for your kids to use if they're, you know, you're going on a hike or going to the park and they want to take little things along with them. It's not a big deal if this gets dirty or if it gets stained. They could put little treasures in it that they find on their hike, or they could just carry around their stuffed animal in it and, you know, have it on their arm. They could put a little water bottle in it. Obviously you don't want to put anything in it that is going to bust through the bottom because this is not sewn, it is just tied. But with the double knots, it should stay pretty well. Now you can see that I have 2 versions of a tote bag. Obviously they have a little bit of a different look to them because this one is tied at the bottom and this one is sewn. I do like the look of the sewn one easier, and actually it is faster because of all the tying. Now this is a great thing to do with your kids, especially if they haven't learned how to sew or they're not ready to, or they just don't really want to. You can try this, but I highly recommend doing this version because it's just so simple and it has kind of a clean look at the bottom, and it probably will be a little bit stronger than actually tying, and there won't be any tiny little holes at all. So this is a great way to save those t-shirts from the donation pile and reuse and repurpose them in your home. If you're looking for more sewing tutorials, head over to my website, siloandsage.com/sewing, and you'll find tons of sewing tutorials, lots of sewing inspiration, and even a bunch of free patterns that you can download to use in your own home. Thanks for joining me today. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and keep cultivating your home, and I will see you next time in the next video. Bye!